But Old Big Bear, as she was known, was, oh, she was a loved car. This is one of the old Greyhound airport service buses, when they used to run out to National Airport before the metro reached out that far. They're one of the original livery cars in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. They were pretty much like the MC-5 when they were delivered, with the thin red stripe. One of the original livery schemes are Western Greyhound on our way into San Francisco. All the Greyhound subsidiaries and friends of Greyhound purchased this car in quantity. Here's one, an old Kerrville bus. Got this down in Houston. Old Big Bear was the first MCI that would be bought in reasonable quantity, as we said, outside Greyhound. Once again, Greyhound had the need to be able to sell the car to the outside operators as well as operating it themselves. They were no longer concerned with now having this super special bus, or were they? Because they had created this, the mighty MC-6. It was a behemoth. It was years ahead of its time. As a matter of fact, it was too far ahead of its time. It was 102 inches wide and was not allowed on any of the roads of the United States. What happened is the political administration in Washington changed rather abruptly on Greyhound, and all of their friends were gone. And they felt that it would be a shoo-in before the upsets to naturally just go and put the lobby on and get 102-inch wide vehicles in the highways of America. Didn't work out. They had, of course, hoped that it was going to impact like the Scenicruiser did. Wasn't in the cards. Even from the rear, this was an exceptional bus. They were able to petition New York and a couple other places where they still had some clout to be able to get on the thruway and get into Toronto from New York with the car. This was one of the 12-cylinder. They all had 12 cylinders at first, but this was one of the 12-cylinder Canadian cars. This is the first one I ever saw. It came out of the New York Port Authority at me, and I almost forgot to take its picture. I was so shocked. You got to remember now, there was this great period of time here in the 60s that I was away from buses for a long period of time. I had no idea this thing was in existence. It was so unique that the wheels were different. The tires were made expressly for it. And when it came time for Greyhound to sell these off to the public, they neglected to tell you that kind of stuff. It was the beginning of the emergence of the new deceptive Greyhound and money at all costs. She would, of course, be Pepsi-ized, for the lack of a better terminology. That's what it is, a Pepsi-Cola bottle sideways. The American ones with their 8-cylinder engines would end up working in California as commuter cars with cash boxes in them, running down to San Ysidro on the border. GM was making a new kind of bus, and Greyhound bought 300 odd of them because of a previous commitment to a contract. But with the advent of the MC-7, GM would become history. Two series would be purchased, the 4107 and the 4108 here. They're both 35-foot buses. The 4108 had a little further improvement on it technologically wise. So the great Greyhound-GM relationship would come to an end. It was not a happy marriage, a happy divorce. One of the last attempts by Greyhound to do some creative busing was the Tassico Saudi Arabian oil field MC-5s, MC-5Cs with a double roof for the heat in Saudi Arabia. I shot these brand spanking new, right fresh out of the factory. on their way to Saudi Arabia. Now there was a rear door transit version made as well. That was still in the assembly line when I was at MCI. The first ones were nearing getting on rubber. Like their big sisters, they were partially constructed in Winnipeg, then flatbedded down to Pembina, which is about, I think about 60 miles south of Winnipeg. There they were taken off the flatbeds, and they had these little dollies that they were on, and then they were tugged around the plant for finishing. As successful as the MC-7 was, however, she would give way to the MC-8. Oh, but before we go to the 8, lest we forget, the mighty Greyhound MC-7 Turbo Cruiser. She ran between Boston and New York. You could put ice cream cones or whatever you wanted in that fuel tank and that turbine would burn it, just about. She had so much torque that she only had forward and reverse. Very careful reverse. She had no gearing. She was pegged in high gear, an automatic transmission pegged in high gear. Because if you put the torque to that thing on the lower ranges of the transmission, it would be like a bullet. And one of the rarest Greyhound MC-8s you'll ever see. The KG lines, one of two. They kept two coaches looking like this. In Greyhound Pepsi scheme. The rest of the KG line cars looked like this. Joel Akers, who they gave complete reign to and they had complete faith in, liked Eagles. Until recently, of course, they were the only Greyhounds that ever carried Eagles, at least in the United States. KG lines would last right up to the Eagle 10. And then Jefferson lines would sell them out. Trailways sold out their interest, and Greyhound agreed to sell their interest to Jefferson lines. Now, if you remember, KG lines carried at all times the current Trailway logo and the current Greyhound logo. One year, Joel would report to Phoenix. The next year, he would report to Dallas. Each company took a year in authority at KG lines. Again, the very first livery that the MC-7s came out in, the Super 7 Scenicruiser. And now the mighty MCI MC-8. She was on the scene. This is a Canadian car. Now in Canada it's still called Scenicruiser. This is a Scenicruiser Series 8. So the little 5 grew into a 7. You certainly can't say it grew into a 6. And then the 7 grew into the 8. Another piece of history, New Mexico Transportation, one of their 8s. New Mexico Transportation is now part of TNM&O. She was radically squared off from an MC-7 design. Matter of fact, very square. Although they kept the basic framing and jigs, so the hump resulted in the hump was still in the MC-8. And once again, this car would drive even another nail deep in the coffin of General Motors bus building facility, as this car was sold on the outside open market as well. Although by now, Greyhound had created a factory in Roswell, New Mexico, to build their own called Transportation Manufacturing Company, TMC. Now, as successful as the 8 was, it wasn't as long-lived as one might expect, and almost immediately they turned around and created the MC-9. Although there was no shortage in 8s anywhere on the system. They were very easy to come by. And the MC-9 would become the new king of the block, as it were. She would be surpassed in 5,000 units, which was previously held only by the GM 4104. So between the 8, shown here, Now here's a 9 for Southeastern Stages, who at one time owned 40-odd%. Greyhound, rather, who owned 40-odd% of this operation. They no longer do. Southeastern Stages has distanced themselves from the Greyhound image as far as they possibly can. Then, of course, came the beautiful 102 and 96A series MCIs. Again, sold in great quantity. And now, of course, we get into the dumbest thing that has ever been allowed since the creation of the bubonic plague. Greyhound and Trailways became one. Well, let's see how that came about now. What happened was that Phoenix and Teats, who absolutely drips venom for anything even remotely associated with Greyhound, sold the operation to Fred Curry, the Greyhound. Then, of course, the Dallas-based Trailways Incorporated was just about hours from going belly up, and then Fred Curry purchased it. To this day, I can't understand why, unless he wanted ego, because basically the thing was going to die anyhow. So why spend money for something that's going to die? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But nonetheless, Greyhound and Trailways became one. It was, like I said, one of the greatest fiascos in the history of mankind. The ICC should have never allowed such a thing. Thus, we started to see some unique Greyhounds. From the point of view of the bus fans, it was a pretty neat thing. From the point of view of reality, it wasn't. I have to admit one thing, though. The Greyhound Eagle 15 was a sharp-looking car. That was one of the nicest paint jobs I've ever seen on an Eagle. But, of course, it was inevitable that Greyhound would enter bankruptcy because it was thoroughly mismanaged. The employees were at its jugular vein. No matter which way it turned, it was going belly up because it was being skimmed something terrible. It was pretty well looted. Its assets drained off. It's it's doubtful if it can survive. They're out of bankruptcy again, but all I need is 3 creditors to call, and they're already playing games again with them. And then it's involuntary Chapter 7. So I think you're looking at an Eastern Airlines or Pan Am Airlines type affair here. Started, of course, with the rape of the company by Phoenix and the desertion of it. I understand tomorrow morning if you went into the Dial Corporation, is what Teats now calls himself, with checkbook in hand, you'd own MCI in a heartbeat, or anything else that has to do with buses. She's come a long way from the time I shot this picture as a young man. She hasn't come in a good direction either, I'm sorry to say. I just can't. Quite seriously, it's like watching a loved one dying of cancer. You wish it would be over. You want it to die a quiet death. So as the sun set on this little New Mexico transportation, we're going to set the sun on it. I think the whole organization the sun is setting on. Catch you later. Rather huge video catalog, and by no means, again, is everything like the scrapbook here. Not at all. I can promise you nobody has bus videos like we do. We may not be in the $100,000 class of production company, but what we get is rare because we get behind the scenes. And of course, even when we are out in the street shooting, well, you get the benefit of 30 years of professional transport photography. I've got over 200 magazine covers under my belt. Transit buses? Oh, Lord. We don't forget you transit folks. As a matter of fact, our history from 1900 to 1945 is absolutely awesome with transit. And like some folks who only give you what's in their backyard, we travel. You just saw Jacksonville, here's Orlando, we get around the countryside. Of course, when it comes to historic stuff, well, we're right up there with that too, boy, I want to tell you. Some instances, we've got a lot of really historic rolling footage, not just pictures. This is a restored piece of history. This is John Holbein Blue Ridge Trailways and their beautiful 4104, restored in the colors of Carolina scenic stages. Now, we're slowly but surely backing into rail video. There's a lot of our footage that is very rare and very old. We've got a commuter railroad video underway that's just going to blow your socks off, I want to tell you. There are definite scenes here in Boston, for instance, like the old station in Salem, Massachusetts. This is history now. This no longer exists. It's all done and over with. We already have at present a very exciting, according to my rail fans, my IBCers who are rail fans, a very exciting scrapbook out. Now, you got to remember, there have been 3 railroads that have been customers of mine in the past. So we've got, again, some very interesting, some very unique pictures. And our scrapbooks are going to be dynamite. But, of course, when it comes to airplanes, we had clients there, too. Our new Pan Am video, the movie, Pan Am the movie, is a runaway. It's